was on that day that I thought, I've got to do something so this doesn't happen again. And that was a turning point in my career. It's so unlikely, but it's possible. And process safety incidents, no matter how unlikely, are possible. I think safety needs good ED&I to be successful. When we started, we had 6 founding members. Fast forward to today, we have 120 member companies, and we're still growing.
Every leader has a story to tell, and the Safe Leader podcast uncovers the diversity story behind leading figures championing change to make our world a better place. Join me, your host, Mark McBride-Wright, as we hear from business leaders, academics, entrepreneurs, and agents of change as they share their journeys of innovation, resilience, and transformation. Together, we explore how they embrace the principles of safe leadership, sharing, acting, feeling, and empowering to create safer, more inclusive environments for everyone. Trish Kerin is an award-winning international expert and keynote speaker on process safety leadership and the inaugural director of the Institution of Chemical Engineers IChemE Safety Centre. She leads an international team who help organisations share and learn in process safety. Trish leverages off her experience to help organisations improve their process safety outcomes. She is a chartered engineer, registered professional process safety engineer, fellow of IChemE and Engineers Australia, and a senior member of American Institution of Chemical Engineers. Trish holds a diploma in occupational health and safety, a master of leadership, and is a graduate of the Australian Institute of Company Directors. So nice to see you, Trish. How are you?
I'm doing well, Mark. Really great to see you and connect in again.
Yeah, it's been quite a few years. So this is the first episode of. Well, hang on. Let me say that. Might not be the first one in terms of how we cue them.
Right.
So this is a recording of the Safe Leader podcast. It's a new project that I'm doing whilst I'm over here now in New York. I'm really excited to lean into the book that I've written, The Safe Leader, and I've curated a guest list of people who I've invited who are specialists in this field. And you were one of the first people front of mind, given your role in process safety and leader at the Institution of Chemical Engineers International Safety Centre. Have I said that right? International Safety Centre?
Just IChemE Safety Centre.
IChemE Safety Centre. IChemE Safety Centre. And so I've prepared some questions for you. But really, this is just a space to riff off one another, offer some insights into any advice that you've got. You're also a podcast host yourself, I noticed. So
yes, I am.
Any hints or tips as well as we go through would be much appreciated. But I guess to start off with, I wanted to go back to when you and I first met. I connected with you when I was running inter-engineering for LGBTQI plus engineers, and you were on a radio station over in Melbourne. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. I was on the board of Joy 94.9, which is Australia's only gay and lesbian radio station, and I was on that board for a total of about 7 years, and two of those I was vice president for. So, really interesting and exciting activity to be part of, and Joy is still going strong today. It's fabulous to have been part of its esteemed history, and to be there as it did its coming of age. I was there as it turned 21, and all those things. So that was pretty cool.
And so if we go back to. So you've had an impressive career in process safety. That was one of the areas in which we connected. I was a process safety engineer by background, working in industry. And you've led global initiatives to improve safety outcomes. So what first ignited your interest in safety in high hazard industries?
Yeah, I was actually having this conversation last night over dinner with someone, and I started my career in the oil industry, and I started in designing and installing aviation fueling systems.
Yeah.
And after a few years of doing that, I moved to the refinery and started to do some refinery operations, some shipping operations. And over those early years in my career, I was actually involved and, in fact, probably the cause of two process safety incidents that had occurred. Now, neither of them were significant. They didn't reach a significant consequence, but they were process safety type, low-level events in both instances. And I didn't still really connect it at that point in time.
Okay.
But when I was working at the refinery, one thing that did happen was the Longford gas plant explosion in Victoria.
Yeah.
And the refinery I worked at was at the end of a pipeline that came from first originally Longford, and then that product moved to another intermediate terminal and then onto the refinery. And I remember standing in the refinery planner's office when he got a phone call to say that they were shutting the pipeline down because there had been an explosion at Longford. And we turned the radio on to hear the news because it was last century. We couldn't just quickly go on the internet and see what was happening. And so we turned on the old school AM radio to listen to the breaking news. And the news was saying there had been an explosion and there were 2 workers missing.
Right.
And that point hit me like nothing else because there was a few of us in the room, we all just looked at each other and we knew they weren't missing. You know, when you work in that environment and you hear that, you know they're not alive anymore.
Yeah.
That really, it absolutely gutted me. I can remember precisely where I was standing the moment that call came in on the 25th of September 1998. It was about 12 o'clock in the afternoon. It was lunchtime.
Okay.
And it was just, it really shook me at that point in time. And it was on that day that I thought, I've got to do something so this doesn't happen again.
Yeah.
And that was a turning point in my career. I didn't do safety immediately at that point. I continued in operations management for a period of time before I then actually found myself in a safety role and discovered how much I loved being in safety. But, as I think back and reflect, that turning point, that was a point in my life where I thought, this can't happen again. And sadly, there were political reasons why this incident, it had a lot of uproar in the city of Melbourne. It cut off natural gas supply for 2 or 3 weeks. That upset the population because we all had to have cold showers. We had no gas hot water system making hot water for us. So politically, it was a big thing. Yeah. But John and Peter died that day.
Yeah.
And people forget that. And I think we owe it to those that have tragically lost their lives in process safety incidents to just do better.
Absolutely. And I've heard, you ascribing their names there to the incident. That's one of the best ways to commemorate, to honour what they gave and the fact that they existed. I've seen some clients before it becomes a bit of they become a number, or it's like the identity gets lost in the box of we don't talk about this stuff now, when actually in safety it's the opposite to that. We need to talk about it. We need to do the root cause analysis to share the lessons learned so it doesn't happen again.
Yep, absolutely.
And is that so you've been the director of the IChemE Safety Centre for over 10 years now, I think it is.
Yeah, coming up on 11.
So how is that going? Are you worked a bit in industry then in a process safety role, but now you must have oversight over quite a unique position actually in supporting the sector.
Yeah, it's a really interesting role to be part of. So when I was recruited into IChemE to start the centre,
right,
and when we started, we had 6 founding members that put funding forward to get it off the ground.
Okay.
Fast forward to today, we have 120 member companies or
organisations.
Wow,
that's amazing.
In 11 years. And we've actually increased our membership numbers every year over those 11 years. So, and we're still growing. We're still creating influence. And, helping companies get access to useful material that can help them improve their process safety. And so it's really exciting to be part of something like that, where I liken it to when I worked in industry, I had influence in one company.
Yep.
I now work globally in the process safety field. I am able to influence not only different companies in an industry sector, but different industry sectors. This is
Not
an
just
opportunity.
energy. Yeah,
Yeah,
not
it's not
just
just energy.
oil and gas. Yeah.
No, I work in so many different fields now, so many different industry sectors with people on process safety, and so it's wonderful to actually be able to raise that awareness and create that that influence so that they get better results.
Can you give our audience a bit of a flavour of the expanse of process safety? Because people's minds might just go straight to gas, risk of
Yeah.
explosion, crop by your example as well that you've given. But you're in so many more industries. Can you just give us a flavour of the sectors, the diversity of the
Yeah.
sectors that you
So
transect?
So we talk about process safety as a high consequence, low likelihood loss of control event,
Right.
not loss of containment. Containment is an outcome of losing control.
Interesting.
So if you go a
Interesting.
little bit further upstream, we can start to talk about different sorts of sectors. So, I'm currently working with the mining sector and minerals processing, with new energies, with food and beverage manufacturing, dairy, those sorts of things, pharmaceutical sector, water and utilities treatment, as well as your traditional oil and gas, your traditional chemical sectors, pulp and paper manufacturing,
Yeah.
aviation, air traffic control.
Yeah. Yeah.
So all sorts of different things can actually, when we think about it as this high consequence, low likelihood loss of control, and apply the principles to that, we can start to talk about and importantly learn from so many diverse sectors. So learning from the aviation sector is a great thing, but
Yeah.
also helping the aviation sector learn some things too.
Yeah.
So there's a whole range of different crossover.
What would you... So I recently started a visiting professorship at UCL in inclusive engineering leadership, and I have come at it, admittedly, with a bias of safety, being a chemical engineer. And I had this bias that safety, and I've used inverted commas there, is understood by engineers commonly across all disciplines. But what I've realized I actually need to do is step back a bit and do a kind of fundamental baselining, because the civil engineers were interpreting what we mean by safety differently to the electrical engineering students when compared to the chemical engineering students, etc., etc. So can you just give some color to that experience I've just described and how it plays out
Yeah.
in industry? And then maybe what do you think we should be doing earlier on in the chain to
Yeah.
bring some common ground to that?
Yeah, look, that is definitely a gap. So we don't tend to see most disciplines of engineering actually talk about process safety in the undergraduate degrees. Chemical engineering does talk about process safety specifically, typically in ChemEng.
Yes.
Other disciplines don't. We come to safety in a different way at times. So my background discipline's actually mechanical engineering.
Okay.
Now, back when I studied mechanical engineering, I really don't think we understood safety terribly well there either. Other than, we focused on, we would do finite element analysis and crash modelling for vehicles. So we thought we talked safety because we were designing cars so that the people inside were protected. So we were used to dealing with managing dissipation of energy and release energy in some form. Not chemical energy, although, we also understood the fundamentals of chemical energy release because mechanical engineers are also the ones typically designing internal combustion engines, for example.
Yeah.
So we get the thermodynamics of all of this, right? We study thermodynamics as well. And then you look at civil engineers and their safety was quite different. They're concerned, more typically with earth cave-ins, if they're tunneling, for example, structural integrity of buildings in high winds,
Yeah.
and those sorts of things. So we all look at safety differently. We look at it from our own discipline. I think when we start to cut across process safety and start to say, okay, if we talk about this high consequence, low likelihood loss of control, it applies across all of the disciplines, but we need to get better at communicating that. And so I think there needs to be a move to have that concept of process safety embedded in every engineering discipline, regardless of what it is, because there is a serious impact there. And in my career and time in this role, I've talked about many different incidents. And if I think about civil engineering, one of the incidents I've talked about is the collapse of the Westgate Bridge in Melbourne under construction. And it was a high consequence failure of a bridge construction that killed several workers because, even just sort of layout planning, the rest huts were located underneath the span that was being built.
Oh, right.
When that span collapsed at morning tea, it killed everybody in the huts.
Yeah.
And people were gathered in the huts because it was break time.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and I've talked about that in terms of understanding mechanical stress, because that was civil construction, but the bridge suffered mechanical stress, which caused a catastrophic failure.
Yeah.
And, often chemical engineers don't talk about mechanical stresses. Flixborough incident 50 years ago is a classic example of not understanding mechanical stress.
Yeah.
It's a pipeline that resulted in a catastrophic event. So, we all need to work together. We all need to have a base level understanding. And one of the things I talk about is process safety is the ultimate team sport. We all have a role to play. We all play different roles, but we all have a role to play in making that team successful and winning the game. And for me, winning the game is safe production. Not production, safe production. Whatever you produce, whatever your output is, safe output. That's what the game needs to be.
That's really interesting. It kind of, I reflect on my own relationship with safety and journey into the industry, and maybe I had a bit of a warped impression in terms of how integrated safety is understood across disciplines, because I didn't work in the detailed design phase where you tend to then be much more in the depths of your discipline. I was more concept design. So I worked on, I think in the years that I was at my employer, I worked on about 15 different projects. No project would be any longer than 2 or 3 months, but you were always working with piping engineers, electrical engineers, mechanical. We were all there in the hazard workshops, the ISD workshops, looking at designs from are they inherently safe perspective. And so it really, it shocked me a bit, to be honest. And it's a little bit frustrating that we have to do this education piece to our future leaders now to even get parity, equivalency of our understanding of safety, because the angle I'm trying to take with the safe leader is trying to use the fabric of safety and the familiarity that engineers have, or those working in high hazard industries. It doesn't just have to be the engineers. The relationship that we have with safety, and how can we extend that to now look at the new concepts around psychological safety and the ability to be not just physically present on site, but also mentally present as well. So these concepts that we often ascribe to the EDI movement of masking, hiding, covering, the energy delta between being your whole self, but then showing up as someone different and then being distracted. I wondered if I could hog the airwave here, just monologuing about this. It's my passion area. I'm really keen to understand your relationship or your thoughts on where can safety be used to communicate diversity, equity, and inclusion. Is there an opportunity there? What are your thoughts?
Look, I think there is, because at the end of the day, the way we get better safety outcomes is by engaging collaboratively with the entire workforce. And that means we need the entire being there for everybody. Everybody needs to be able to show up without fear in their workplace, because they bring unique and diverse perspectives, and that's incredibly important. So I think safety needs good ED&I to be successful, because that starts to help you deliver that psychological safety in the workplace. Because if we don't have the psychological safety, people can't say what they need to say and speak up and intervene, importantly, in safety when they need to. Can we use safety to help drive that ED&I as well? I think we can, by creating safe environments where people are respected for what they contribute and what they bring to the table. So I think it goes both ways, and I think we need to get a lot better at doing that. ED&I is critically important, I think, to make sure that the people are able to bring their whole self. And, you know, I have had periods in my life where I didn't bring my whole self to work.
Okay.
And how relieving it is to be able to is amazing.
And do you see companies opening up to this? I mean, it sounds pretty obvious when we talk about it in this lens. You know, I've seen the penny drop for many an engineer and many an HR professional and many a director. But sometimes the most obvious things are the things that we don't see. And so it's our role as educators to try and shift the focus to be in this way.
I think we need to get better at showing the value of it. Because, I mean, I'm sure you hear the rhetoric around, you know, the anti-woke and, you know, we're sick of political correctness and all this sort of stuff. And I got to admit, I sit back and I look at some of this stuff and I think the things that people are saying are woke and politically correct. I was brought up with those just being polite and respectful.
Yeah.
You know, if someone wants to be referred to in a certain way, then it's polite to acknowledge their request.
Absolutely.
I don't see that as, you know, politically correct or woke. I just see that as fundamental dignity and politeness. And my mother would have been horrified if I didn't treat people with respect and be polite to them. That was how I was raised.
Yeah.
And it's like, how is that? How have we lost that?
I think, absolutely. I think there's a relationship here with connectedness that we need to speak more into when it comes to the white, straight, cisgendered, heterosexual, neurotypical, able-bodied male that represents 84% of the United Kingdom engineering workforce and similar stats globally, you know, a male majority workforce essentially. And what's really charting the course of what I'm trying to influence here is this whole discovery around masculinity in engineering. I genuinely could not believe the statistics in 2018 where the Office of National Statistics in the UK, death by suicide broken down by occupation, the construction, manufacturing and process industries combined had the highest suicide rate of any other sectors in the UK. And we then did our own research, eco engineers, on masculinity in engineering, and found similar rates of suicidal ideation and self-harm. 1 in 5 engineers reporting losing work colleague to suicide. 1 in 4 reporting suicidal ideation or self-harm. And so men were 3.5 times more likely to answer yes to that than female respondents. So my aha moment was, well, hang on. Firstly, we would never tolerate such a high potential loss of life in any physical hazard scenarios. We would design them out, eradicate them, trying to get them to as low as reasonably practicable for residual risk management. Yet here we are when it comes to people's psychological safety being at risk. They're obviously not in a culture where they can be open and talk about whatever the root causes that might be driving these high incident rates, you know. And actually, that's what inclusion and belonging tries to achieve. It's creating cultures where you can be your whole self, bring your whole self to work. So I think there's a relationship and connectedness that we need to make there, and then I think it'll get better. It's interesting you mentioned about the political dynamics. You know, we're recording this episode 2 weeks away from the US election, and that pendulum swing of equality that can move forward, but it can also regress backwards. What role do you think, what are you seeing in terms of like working with your members? You've got such a large number there now through the IChemE Safety Centre. Like, what do you kind of sense is the potential here to help the people that you're working with, from a safety culture perspective, get better at their culture internally in totality?
Yeah, I think it's a challenging area because we're also trying to shift the needle and have people recognise that process safety, whilst it is grounded in engineering, is not just engineering.
Yeah.
That process safety involves people, and we need to be able to understand the human factors elements of what we do, but also the cultural aspects of what we do and how we do it. So I think it's around trying to shift that needle. And, you know, the organisations that join the Safety Centre are interested in improving their process safety. They're interested in understanding how they can do that. And so when we can then credibly say things around, you know, if we've got good consultation with employees and they're able to share what is important, you will get better outcomes.
Yeah.
And so I think it's around, you know, sometimes just fundamentally coming back to some of those basics of, you know, it's about consultation. And consultation doesn't mean I have to agree with you.
Yes.
But consultation does mean I have to ask you, I have to genuinely listen and take into account before I make my decision. And as I said, it doesn't mean I have to agree. I might not agree with all the consultation that I receive, but it's important to genuinely listen, take it into account, and then communicate back the decision. Communicate back if I didn't agree with you, why, and what we're going to do going forward. And some of this is really basic stuff.
Yeah.
Yet we just don't seem to be able to get it right, or we get caught up in our own egos.
Yeah.
And stuck with, you know, well, I'm the boss, I get to make these decisions. Well, that's so old school.
You're describing there like really good basic practice in mental health first aid training, which is that ability to one-on-one tune out the non-verbal communication that might be coming into your head that is your impetus to respond. But that's almost like scaling it up to an organizational level, isn't it? And tuning it, not having a predetermined course of direction that you're going to go in the consultations just to tick the box and get the outcome, but actually have an open heart and mind to figuring out whether or not your people may have some input that challenges that. Obviously, leaders have got a direction to travel that they anticipate leading the organization. Otherwise, they're not very good leaders, you know, but it's about challenging those notions and making sure you're shaping the decision making and minimizing impact.
One of the things I actually talk a lot about with different leaders around the world is around, you know, engaging with the workforce and having conversations with them. And I always sort of give them the caveat of, you know, you actually need to get out there and talk to your workforce and ask them questions, ask them what's going on.
Yeah.
But you have to genuinely listen and take appropriate action on the conversation. And if you are not prepared to genuinely listen and take appropriate action, don't talk to them. Because if you are just going to tick the box and go through the motions and pretend, before you do that, the workforce might think you don't care.
Yeah.
But if you actually just go through the motions, don't pay any attention, ask the question because everyone says you have to go and ask the question, don't pay any attention, you've just proven to the workforce that they know you don't care.
Yeah.
And so them thinking you don't care is probably better than them knowing you don't care.
Yeah, totally.
You're going to get somewhere with it. But,
totally.
And so it's a little bit flippant of, you know, if you can't do it properly, don't do it at all. But the aim is actually do it properly. Learn to listen.
Yeah.
Learn to actually hear what people are saying to you.
Yeah.
And do with that information what you need to.
That really plays into the safe leader model of share, act, feel and empower, trying to get people to understand their own difference, their own diversity story first, bring it to the surface, share it, talk about it, and then can you be a lighthouse for others, you know, to bring people to you? I find there's a lot of men that haven't opened up about fertility issues, struggling to conceive, to start a family, etc. I even had one client actually where the executive team it transpired through the training session that 3 out of 10, were going through IVF,
Yeah.
different stages. Some just come to terms with the fact that they have to use it, some well into the cycles, and none of them were talking about it between one another. Literally in that moment, in that session, was the discovery that they were going through that. 30% of the leadership team. And they thought, well, my goodness, if we scale this up to our business size, how many people is this affecting? So do you know what they did? They did an investigation. They kind of culturally set some stuff up to try and find out the conversation. A couple of the guys actually spoke about it publicly at one of their town halls. And yeah, a lot of people were going through it. So they then created a parent and carers network. They adjusted I think they even had to bring in like a new policy, a new process. But what it did was made a conversation that wasn't happening, for whatever reason wasn't happening, whether it was taboo or just no one was talking about it. They became the luminaries to table that conversation. More people then, it's just like mining the diamond, as we say in safety, looking for the things that we don't know what's happening. It then became a known, and then you can make decisions on fact and things that affect people. But it takes for those people going through that to share, and very often white straight men may often feel excluded from the EDI conversation, like they are othered from it and they're not part of it, but actually they do have a story to tell. And so yeah, I just think we need to give some space to that to help bring the temperature down on the conversation of this anti-woke, anti-this, anti-that. It's one of my bugbears, just how polarized it can become.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's harming people, and it's affecting their well-being and their mental health, which is actually having effects on organisations.
Yeah.
Both not only in the safety space, but also in the economic space, the financials. So, if you've got people that are really feeling targeted and not included in what's going on, then you do not have your best potential business running.
Yeah. What are there any tools that we use in industry? I'm coming back, keep thinking about this education of future leaders, like the students, the apprentices, the technicians, the people that are going through the ladder now. Is there any stuff that we do that we could bring forward to like the education experience, that then when those graduates come off the degree conveyor belt or the apprenticeship conveyor belt and then move into industry, they've got a greater understanding? I tried to play, the reason I'm asking this, I tried to play around a bit with some of my UCL students with looking at equality impact assessments that we do in industry. Sometimes we do them too late, that they don't actually have the intended impact that they're designed to have. But then could we bring that into the engineering projects, the capstone project that they did for one of their designs, to then be looking at communities through an EDI lens, through the stakeholder engagement, so it's the process of doing the engineering and the diversity of the composition of the degree class, and does the engineering student team feel psychologically safe to challenge one another? But then also thinking about the communities that they're designing things for, and are they involving them or are they making assumptions? There's one tool that gets used in industry that I didn't see being used in academia, and maybe there's a lift and shift opportunity that then increases its usage in 5 to 10 years' time.
Yeah, look, possibly there is. I think one of the interesting things is when I did my engineering degree a long time ago, we actually had to do, I think it was 2 units over our whole 4 years.
Okay.
In the humanities field.
Interesting.
And so, we had to, there was like 7 or 8 different classes we could pick to do, and we had to pick 2 of them over our whole 4-year degree, and we had to complete those to be able to graduate.
Right.
And, so, one of them was sex and society and understanding gender.
Wow, very interesting.
Now, this was in the 90s.
It's probably more progressive then than it's become now.
No, possibly. And there are other ones that were more arts-based. And I think at the time, these engineering students that were perhaps had never studied humanities or certainly pursued it very much through high school because they were all very math science people.
Yeah.
I thought it was quite fascinating to watch who was picking which subjects and what we were saying about them at lunchtime when we were talking.
Yeah.
And it wasn't necessarily respectful conversations about them, I'm sad to admit.
Yeah.
But it was an interesting concept. And I don't know whether we still do things like that. I don't know whether my old university still has that requirement in their engineering degree. But at the end of the day, humanities is equally as important as engineering in my book, because we do need to understand the beauty of the world, not just the science of the world. And I think one of the other things I've seen happen a lot now is we talk a lot about STEM, and I've now seen people starting to talk about STEAM.
STEAM, the arts, yeah.
And I heard STEAM for the first time, and I have to admit my initial bias was, what? And then I thought, that actually makes sense.
Yeah.
Because engineering at its core is actually a creative science.
Yes. Yes.
We have to be creative and innovative to solve the problems. There is a level of artisticness in engineering. And I think we need to be willing to embrace that and pick it up. I like the idea of taking engineering students and apprentices and whatever, and actually making sure that they do have some exposure to the humanities.
Yeah.
Because that also has a lot of critical thinking training in it.
Yeah.
But it also broadens your horizon, it broadens your outlook, and it opens your mind up to different concepts and different ideas. So I think that's actually something that probably we could be doing a little bit better with and a little bit more of. And the fact is, English and, for example, English literature is a humanities subject, yet we do engineering, and as engineers we have to communicate.
Yeah. Public speaking and being able,
Writing a document that someone can actually understand.
Yeah,
that
of
is
course.
Concise, but written in a simplified way, not simplistic, but a simplified way that others can understand.
Yeah.
And, you need English or whatever your native language skill is that you write in to be able to do that.
Yeah.
And, I studied English literature in my final year of high school.
Wow.
Because I loved English and literature. So, I went into engineering not having done just pure sciences and maths in my high school.
Yeah.
I did English literature as well because I found it interesting. And I think it's really helped my career long term in terms of being... my main role is really a safety and an engineering communicator.
Yes.
I'm not the person you want to have doing detailed calculations for you.
Yeah.
But I'm the person that can explain that to someone that needs to understand it.
Yeah, totally. And we need communication conduits that have that technical understanding as well. So with that in mind then, what excites you most about the future of process safety? What opportunities, innovations do you see in the field? What, if you're leading the IChemE Safety Centre with this phenomenal growth that's happened, what are your aspirations for it and the industry in the next 5 to 10 years?
Yeah, so I'll tackle the aspirations first. So I want to see the Safety Centre continue to grow. I want to see it continue to attract new members around the world, new organisations, new industry sectors, so that we can continue to create this rich learning that we see when we start to talk outside of our own little inner circles. And I think that's really, really important. In terms of what I think are some of the exciting areas, I think we've still got a long way to go on human factors and understanding the human interaction with the system. If someone makes a mistake, that's not the cause of the incident.
Yes.
The system around them that allowed and facilitated that mistake to result in a catastrophic outcome, that's the issue we need to get to. So I think we've still got a long way to go here. I still don't think a lot of organisations are yet embracing enough the human factors aspects. The other aspect that, technology is fantastic. We need to make sure we're using it appropriately. And I think there is amazing opportunity in technology. But just because you can doesn't mean you should. So there's some technologies that we're embracing and we're using and we're doing all these things with, and you look at it and go, we're not adding any value. Why? Yeah, because it's cool and it's sexy and it's fun. Okay, but it's not helping anything. It's a distraction. People like the bright, shiny thing. It's a distraction. So, there's a lot of excitement about artificial intelligence, obviously AI. The fact is, it's large language models and machine learning. It's not actually artificial intelligence starting off that we're using. Now, I think there's enormous opportunity in machine learning and large language models to be able to sort huge quantities of data that as humans we just can't sort in a time. But we then need the human to take that sorting and make sense of it.
Context.
And get to the next stage of implementation. And so I don't see, that technology that we're going through, that development, eliminating the need for the human input.
Absolutely.
You do need that ability to then look at it and say, okay, is that right? What can we do with it? What's it telling us? Data is one thing, but data without insight is not very useful.
I'm imagining now being able to do a hazard identification study, or for a single facility, getting all the major accident hazard reports, coma reports, or offshore safety cases, getting them all loaded up into an AI, and then you've got the ability to call upon and trend and look for patterns, which is what its benefit tends to be.
Yeah, but then the insight is, so what's that pattern actually alluding to?
Exactly.
And that's the big catch there. And one of the things I talk about, so I wrote a small little book called The Platypus Philosophy, which is about identifying and managing weak signals.
Oh, okay.
How do we actually identify, first of all, that a weak signal has occurred, and then how do we see that and determine whether it's actually something we need to worry about or it's just white noise in the background? So much of it is white noise in the background, but that one important bit, if we just ignore it, could result in an incident. Because, as I'm sure you're aware, after every incident, there were all these warning signs that nobody saw.
Yeah. Why did you call it the platypus? Is there something linked to the animal that...
There is something linked to the animal, yes. It's called the platypus because there's two parts to it as a metaphor. The first part is the platypus is so ridiculous an animal, so unlikely, it should not exist. It's got the bill of a duck, the tail of a beaver, the claws of an otter. It's a mammal that lays eggs.
So it does. Yes. Yeah. I learned that recently from my son.
Yeah, so it sweats milk to feed its young. So it actually sweats it out of its paws and out of its fur. I did not know that. Wow. Its fur glows under ultraviolet light. It bioluminesces, and it uses perception to find its food. And you go, okay, none of these things should work together. It's an animal made up of spare parts, but it's so unlikely.
Oh, I love
that. But it's possible. And process safety incidents, no matter how unlikely, are possible. So first of all, get your head around these things can happen. But then the second part of the metaphor is a platypus is very elusive. They're very hard to see. And if all you see is just the bill sticking out from some reeds in a river and you don't see the rest of it, remember, it's a duck bill. Is it a duck or is it a platypus? And so I then I actually use the words, the letters of the word platypus to have an action plan to sort through that sighting and say, so is it a duck or is it a platypus? Because if it's a duck, it won't hurt you. But another aspect of the platypus that's not very well known is male platypuses have a toxic venom in a spur and they can actually envenomate you and hurt you.
Oh, gosh.
So
right.
You need to know if it's a platypus. If it's a platypus, you've got to manage it and deal with it.
Yeah.
You can ignore it. So I have this concept that I use it's a step process to take you through and say, okay, here's what it means. These are the sorts of things you consider when you see that first weak signal, when you sense that first weak signal impact. And, it's a quick scanning of, I think there might be something here. Okay, now I move into a risk assessment phase.
Fabulous.
Yeah.
Fabulous. Well, I've got some quick fire questions here. Are you you ready?
I'll give it a shot.
Right. So, what's the best piece of advice you've ever received?
Take the opportunity.
What's your favourite safety innovation or tool that has made a difference in your work?
I think so many apps that just make me able to focus in different areas. So there's so many apps. So Tracy jokes that I always say there's an app for that. How did you do this? There's an app for that. So any sort of app I love to help me focus on what I need to be doing.
What's the one thing you do to unwind after a long day?
Walk my dogs.
What's your proudest professional accomplishment?
Creating the safety centre and making it a success.
If you could have dinner with any engineer, expert, industrialist, who would it be?
Trevor Kletz. I never had the pleasure of meeting him. I would love to meet him, or to have met him.
What's a skill you believe every safety professional should have?
Critical thinking.
Tea or coffee?
Coffee.
What's one book, podcast, or resource you'd recommend to someone in safety or process engineering, or engineering in general?
Anything by Trevor Kletz of his mountain of work, and I have to admit I am enjoying reading The Safe Leader at the moment.
Oh, thank you. What's the most exciting project you've worked on?
Oh, that's a really, really tough one because I've done some interesting things. I'm going to go right back to my first job that was very exciting to me at the time, where I was building aviation fueling systems at airports.
Ooh.
And I installed kilometres of underground hydrant systems, fuel hydrants at Melbourne Airport. And I still get a nice little buzz when I'm at Melbourne Airport and I'm standing at a gate and I'm about to get on a plane and I think, I built that.
That's cool. That's cool. If you could give your younger self one piece of advice, what would it be?
Again, take the opportunity. You may not like it, and if you don't, move on to something else. But when an opportunity is presented, give it a go and do your best at it.
That is really great advice, Trish. And I've really enjoyed our conversation today. For our listeners, where can they find out more about your work and what you're involved with? How can they get in contact with you?
So, first of all, there's the work through the IChemE Safety Centre, www.ichemesafetycentre.org. For my own activities, the platypus philosophy and some of the other consulting activities, I do my personal website, www.leadlikekerin.com, so that's Kerin. And you can get my email there as well and see all the different sorts of things I'm doing.
Fabulous. We'll make sure those links are in the show notes as well. Thank you so much for your time today, Trish. I've loved it.
Pleasure, Mark. Always fabulous to have a conversation with you, and hopefully our paths will cross at some point when I get across to New York and say hi.
Absolutely. You're more than welcome to come and visit. See you soon.
See ya. Stay safe.
You have been listening to the Safe Leader podcast, uncovering the diversity story behind leading figures championing change to make our world a better place. If you have enjoyed the episode, please subscribe to the Safe Leader podcast on your podcast platform of choice and get notified when a new episode goes live. Did you know that we also offer a full transcript on each of our podcast episodes? Check out my website, McBride-Wright.com. Here, you can also explore the training, coaching, and keynote speaking services I offer. And whilst you're there, why not join the Safe Leader community by subscribing to the Safe Leader Insights mailing list? Thank you for listening, and please come back and join us on a future episode.